days of notice. 10 days of notice to the public. Certainly notice to the mayor. You know what they did? They didn't give you any notice at all.
Former employees, right?
That's correct. We spoke with one of the plaintiffs who says that she was fired for not being a yes man, for not following the mayor's orders.
News between Dolton's mayor and the village's board of trustees after multiple members did not attend tonight's monthly meeting.
I am about to address some things as the supervisor. There will be no comments. There will be anything. It will just be me addressing.
It began like any other quiet and uneventful Tuesday evening in the small village of Dolton, Illinois. Most residents had grown used to tuning out the monotony of local politics, especially board meetings that rarely offered anything beyond procedural discussion and administrative formalities. But this evening shattered that routine. What should have been an ordinary meeting turned into a defining moment in the ongoing political unraveling of Mayor Tiffany Henyard. As the meeting commenced, it quickly became evident that something was off. Mayor Henyard stepped into the spotlight alone. There were no trustees present, no quorum, and no formal governance occurring. It was not a meeting in any official capacity, but rather a performance. Henyard stood alone at the microphone facing a few audience members and several cameras. Her tone was not one of collaboration or transparency. It was defensive, theatrical, and impassioned. She declared, "This is not a quorum, and this is my statement." And just like that, the political theater of Dolton had unveiled its latest act. From that moment, it became clear that Henyard was no longer trying to govern in the traditional sense. Instead, she was addressing a broader stage one meant not for her constituents, but for the court of public opinion. This was about optics, not operations. Her monologue was defiant and brazen, and suggested desperation more than leadership. But as dramatic as her display may have been, the true chaos was happening behind the scenes where the support structure she had so carefully constructed was beginning to collapse. The real threat to Henyard was not coming from political opponents, journalists, or critical residents. It was emerging from within her own circle. One of the most dramatic and damaging turns in her administration came when leaked footage allegedly shared by someone close to her surfaced online. This footage provided a rare, unfiltered glimpse into the workings of an increasingly embattled administration. Some commentators have called it the most significant political betrayal of the year, while others simply called it a long overdue reckoning. Regardless of interpretation, the impact was immediate and severe. For years, Henyard had insulated herself with a group of loyalists who shielded her from scrutiny. That fortress of loyalty was now crumbling. The illusion of control was slipping. And this time it appeared irreversible. To understand how matters reached such a volatile point, one must rewind several months. Mayor Henyard had been making controversial moves for quite some time. Her decision to unilaterally appoint a new village administrator and a new village attorney without board approval had already raised serious concerns among legal experts and residents alike. She had dragged her personal lawyer into a meeting that had already been canceled solely to berate the absent trustees. Her governance style was becoming increasingly erratic and authoritarian. What had once been perceived as firm leadership now appeared as damage control aboard a rapidly sinking ship. Then came a bombshell from the office of Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul. According to the ruling, the Village of Dolton had violated the Illinois Open Meetings Act on multiple occasions during the summer of the previous year, specifically in the months of June and July. Under Henyard's leadership, Village Hall had been transformed into a veritable fortress. Doors were locked, public seating was removed, and access was deliberately limited. The rationale for this unprecedented security: lockdown was reportedly a handwritten note in blue marker calling the mayor and her mother losers. It is important to note that the note was not delivered until after the meetings had concluded. The Attorney General's office dismissed the justification as not only insufficient but also as a clear overreaction. Unfortunately, this pattern of behavior was not new. Henyard's time in office had been characterized by overreach, overspending, and extreme reactions to even the most minor criticisms. She routinely rejected accountability and doubled down when challenged. And speaking of spending, it was the township credit card records that provided perhaps the most egregious example of her disregard for fiduciary responsibility. After several delays, investigators finally obtained and reviewed Mayor Henyard's township-issued credit card statements. The findings were nothing short of staggering. Over $67,000 had been spent on travel in a period of just 5 months. These expenses included luxurious hotel stays, fine dining, and what appeared to be first-class flights. And that figure did not even include the additional charges billed to the village itself. When combined, the total cost ballooned past $100,000. Henyard defended these expenditures by labeling them as conference-related, but few residents were buying that explanation. To many, this was not public service, it was self-service. However, no character in this unfolding political drama was more central than Keith Freeman Henyard's former right-hand man. Freeman had been deeply embedded in every facet of her administration. He knew where the proverbial bodies were buried. He had knowledge of every questionable deal, every strategy to suppress opposition, and every manipulation of village resources. When Henyard got wind that Freeman may have started cooperating with federal investigators, specifically the FBI, she made a hasty move to oust him. However, in her trademark style, she bypassed proper protocol. The village board had never formally approved his removal. That meant Freeman still held his official position as village administrator. He remained legally employed and very much a threat. He was connected, he was informed, and according to many insiders, he was dangerous to her administration. Rumors began to swirl that Freeman had struck a deal with federal agents and had turned over hard evidence. Not hearsay, not speculation, but actual documentation. The kind of information that does not fade under media spin or disappear during a press conference. It was widely believed that Henyard sensed this shift and scrambled to distance herself from Freeman. But as with so many of her efforts lately, the plan backfired. Freeman himself was no innocent figure. He too was facing charges including bankruptcy fraud and retaliatory actions against employees who did not follow orders. When the scrutiny intensified, Henyard wasted no time in distancing herself from her longtime associate. She denied him publicly and distanced herself professionally. It was a textbook political maneuver designed to preserve her image, but in reality, it only accelerated her downfall. Freeman flipped and the lawsuits began. At least 3 former employees have filed legal actions against the Henyard administration. One alleged that she was terminated for refusing to act as a yes woman to the mayor's demands. Another claimed his business license was unfairly delayed due to personal animosity from Henyard. Then there was Dwayne Thrash, a former maintenance manager who asserted that he was pushed out for resisting a scheme to replace a school board attorney with someone more politically compliant. He is now suing for constitutional violations and wrongful termination. The pattern had become undeniable. Henyard's administration had transformed the village of Dolton into a revolving courtroom. Lawsuits mounted like falling dominoes. Every few weeks, a new case emerged, a new whistleblower surfaced, or a new scandal was exposed. And yet the most explosive moment in this unraveling saga came not from a political rival or a watchdog organization, but from a former ally. Carmen Corral, a previous supporter and fellow board member from Thornton Township, came forward publicly and without reservation. Her message was direct and unequivocal. She stated, "I am speaking out because I believe Mayor Henyard has engaged in unethical and predatory behavior throughout her time in office." She did not hedge her words. She did not whisper. She stood firmly and declared her truth loudly and clearly. And she brought receipts. Corral detailed how Henyard had allegedly manipulated township employees, vendors, and even residents, all in pursuit of constructing a fraudulent image of success. An illusion funded not by performance or merit, but by the very taxpayers who now felt betrayed. According to Corral, Henyard had used the powers of her office not to uplift, but to suppress, intimidate, and consolidate authority. And perhaps more damning than anything, Corral accused Henyard of pressuring her to lie about the origins of a questionable foundation transaction. When Corral refused to go along with the fabrication, their alliance fractured. From that moment, the dominoes began to fall. The whispers became louder. The loyalists began defecting. The illusion began to crack. Despite mounting evidence, mounting criticism, and mounting legal jeopardy, Henyard continued her pattern of denial. During a recent public meeting after being confronted by a bold resident who accused her of stealing from the community, Henyard remained unfazed. She looked into the crowd and doubled down yet again, proclaiming that her critics were motivated by jealousy and resistance to her success. She called herself rare and unique and declared that she was on a divine mission. What followed was not leadership, it was delusion. It was the kind of public unraveling that one might expect from someone who no longer understands the weight of their own actions. The room fell silent, not out of respect, but out of disbelief. The investigations continue. The lawsuits grow in number, former allies continue to flip, and insiders continue to leak. And through it all, Mayor Henyard holds onto the microphone, the podium, and the fantasy that this is all temporary noise, and that her vision will prevail. But illusions cannot withstand the weight of truth, and power built on intimidation, manipulation, and spectacle will always collapse under the force of transparency and accountability. Mayor Henyard's empire is not being torn down by enemies. It is collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions, one betrayal at a time. The curtain has lifted, the performance is over, and what remains is a stage filled with wreckage and an audience that has already begun to leave. What is unfolding in Dolton, Illinois is not just a local scandal, it is a cautionary tale about unchecked power, political insulation, and the erosion of public trust. Mayor Tiffany Henyard's trajectory from a once promising figure in local government to one of the most embattled public officials in the state exemplifies what happens when leadership is replaced with loyalty tests, public service with personal ambition, and transparency with secrecy. As the headlines grew and the investigations mounted, the most consistent refrain among residents was a simple question: how did it get this bad? In the beginning, Henyard positioned herself as a symbol of change, young, Black, and determined to make an impact. To many in Dolton and Thornton Township, she represented a generational shift in leadership. But over time, that image gave way to another narrative, one marked by opacity, retaliatory firings, financial mismanagement, and an alarming consolidation of power. The village board, intended to act as a check and balance on the mayor's authority, was repeatedly sidelined or ignored. Critical decisions, including key appointments, public spending, and legal strategies, were made without their input or approval. Henyard's use of executive privilege became more frequent and more aggressive, often pushing the boundaries of legality and good governance. When the board pushed back, she labeled them as obstructive and disloyal. Outside of government, the damage was even more visible. Basic village services suffered while the mayor prioritized lavish travel and cosmetic public relations campaigns. Civic engagement plummeted as residents began to feel their voices no longer mattered. Public meetings, once opportunities for community input, turned into showcases of control. At times, they were closed off entirely, literally locked down from public view, as was noted in the Illinois Attorney General's report. But what may prove most corrosive is not the wasted money or even the lawsuits. It is the lasting damage to the public's faith in institutions. For every act of intimidation, every dubious financial decision, and every failed attempt to stonewall an investigation, residents lost more faith in their government. That erosion is difficult to quantify, but impossible to ignore. The story is no longer about Tiffany Henyard alone. It is about a political environment that allowed her behavior to flourish, trustees who were silenced or ignored, attorneys who provided cover for questionable decisions, contractors who stayed silent in exchange for township payouts, and residents who are now left to pick up the pieces. Federal agencies are now reportedly involved. There is talk of subpoenas and sealed indictments. The paper trail left behind by former allies is growing longer and more detailed. And while Henyard continues to insist that she is the victim of a smear campaign, the evidence suggests otherwise. This is not politics as usual. It is an abuse of power that has spiraled beyond spin or public relations strategy. Ultimately, the final chapter of this saga will not be written by Henyard, her loyalists, or her critics. It will be written by the courts, the investigators, and the voters who choose whether to reclaim their government or continue watching it decay from within. In a stunning twist that has rocked Dolton, Illinois, Mayor Tiffany Henyard is facing new and explosive allegations after members of her own team reportedly leaked footage that appears to show her engaging in questionable behavior, potentially involving theft of taxpayer resources. The video, which surfaced on social media and rapidly spread across various platforms, has ignited public outrage and prompted calls for immediate investigation by state and federal authorities. According to individuals close to the situation, the footage was allegedly recorded by someone within Henyard's inner circle, someone who had grown disillusioned with her leadership and could no longer remain silent. The grainy but damning video appears to show Henyard misusing public funds and possibly directing staff to carry out personal errands on township time. While the exact contents of the video are still being authenticated, legal experts say that If verified, the footage could serve as a key piece of evidence in potential criminal or civil proceedings. The leak marks a dramatic escalation in the ongoing political crisis surrounding Henyard, who has already been facing intense scrutiny for months over her spending habits, retaliatory firings, and refusal to cooperate with the village board.